now with Mrs. Kusi for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Yagluk and Monsieur Mercenot, for being with us here again today. I see that the 4 lines of inquiry, the first one being competitive procurement practices leading to contracts awarded to McKinsey, yet 78% of McKinsey contracts were sole sourced, and 59% of the contracts you reviewed were sole source contracts specifically under a benchmarking service deal catered towards McKinsey, correct?
Can't validate the statistics, but yes, it sounds accurate.
Thank you. So this specific benchmarking solution was originally valued at $47 million, but then increased to $48.8 million. And only one contract of the 19 provided any justification as to why McKinsey was the only company able to perform the necessary services. So this means $43 million was paid to McKinsey without the proper documentation, a theme we've seen repeatedly, unfortunately, across this government. Do you believe it's because the departments favor McKinsey as a company in comparison to others that perform similar services?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. I think in totality what we concluded, in addition to the NMSO, which you well described, we found instances of favoritism towards McKinsey. Now, the one counter to that is in the NMSO creation, as we reported in the report, there was also the creation of 4 other national master standing offers with other entities, not McKinsey.
So then why do you think it was that departments were changing their requirements to allow for McKinsey to bid on contracts that they were not originally eligible for?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So again, where there's a lack of documentation, we simply allege the facts, right? And I don't know if you recall, but at my previous testimony, I started to talk about negative inferences. At what point do we make negative inferences associated with the lack of documentation? And this report starts that trend of negative inferences where we allege the facts, but ultimately came to a conclusion that in sum, there was favoritism towards McKinsey.
And what evidence did you find that encouraged this favoritism from government departments?
Well, so you've cited 2 examples. So one was in the change of procurement strategy. What we saw was there was a procurement strategy being contemplated, and then it was only through the realization, whether it be directly with McKinsey or through the contracting authority, that they would not be qualified to participate in the process, and therefore there was a reconsideration of the process. Now, could there have been additional factors in addition to that fact alone? Absolutely. And we're not discounting that, but we're simply saying that did happen, and the contracts were in fact awarded to McKinsey. And I just will say one more thing. In addition, we found a lack of documentation. So other ways that we could kind of walk back our findings were if we saw documentation which would explain why some of these decisions were taken. And you'll note in the report there was a lack of information explaining why there was a change of these decisions or procurement strategies.
Interesting, very similar to the Auditor General's findings around ArriveCan, that she was unable to actually determine the actual cost of ArriveCan as a result of missing documentation. The only contract that received a justification was challenged by PSPC. I believe the term that they used specifically was take issue. Words were take issue because it was not accurate and did not justify the exception. Did ESDC respond with the proper justification, or did they maintain their original justification?
The justification that's cited in the report is the only one we saw. We didn't see a subsequent, that might have been previously adjusted, but what we saw in the file is what's reflected in the report, and it provided inadequate justification in our view.
Thank you. To approve the contract, PSPC had the Minister of Procurement personally sign off on this $5.7 million contract. Is that correct?
Yes.
Which minister signed off on this contract?
Minister Tassi.
Thank you. Is it standard practice for a minister to personally approve a contract that their own officials challenge?
So in this circumstance, we did look for the rationale as to why the minister signed off on this specific contract. So there is an internal delegation instrument, I believe, within the department that, based on the dollar value associated with the contract, required minister approval.
What justification would a minister possibly use or to have to sign off on a $5.7 million contract? Can you think of a justification that would be legitimate for where a minister could personally override their officials and sign off on a contract? Have you seen this before? And what would, if not, yes, when? And if not, what kind of justification could possibly be used for this type of authority?
So I will say the implication of any political actor in a procurement process is not ideal, because it puts the political actor in a difficult position, whether approval or rejection of the recommendation to ultimately enter into the contract. That being said, the signature was provided based on the recommendation, and it was in line with the required delegations within the department. Beyond that, we have no additional insight specifically why that was done other than the value of the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Yeglick. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, both of you.